Yeah, I just finished an orchestra. McCarthy was all like, oh, you guys should pay attention to this part and read the screen. I'm like, shut up, keep it right. Fuck.
How long does the paper have to be?
At least 3 pages. Mine is 5.
Do we have gym today?
You said
Yes.
5 pages. He didn't ever give us 3 pages on.
He didn't say a limit, he just said a minimum.
Size 12 common? No, size 20.
If only.
I have about 1.5 pages. I color coded mine. Good for you. I hope I get extras. Mine is 4 pages long, but I'm not doing it.
We're not starting class, can
Water. The fire in her head is the truth of Curtis. She is a vessel for that fire and wants to vomit all over her friends. Kind of like you might end up doing if you drink this much water. But the water is part of the truth of Curtis. A means of protection, preparation, or both for an event that Curtis refers to as the return. Is there anything we can learn about the return? Apparently, what will exist every day in terms of survival is only a fraction of what will come during the return. So you can pretty much guarantee it's going to be a very stressful time. We found a bit about why it will be so stressful. We also have to be ready for it in lesson 15, loneliness. Which you might have already caught is a hugely important aspect of living to the children of the mirror.
Here.
October, Amy, Etha, Thomas, Catherine, Eden,
Here.
Diane, Tommy, Jessica,
Here.
Lucian, Sohail, Alexander, Derek, Colin, Sybil, Sammy, Amanda.
Here.
All right, so first thing today is volume 2 of your book.
Okay.
Which means if you have volume 1, I will put it in your class. If you don't, you try to remember.
Can I keep both? Because I really like this.
You're not going to need it again.
What if I need to say
Lincoln, make sure that Mr. Lincoln is on the front of your book. Sometimes the other volumes get mixed in.
Oh no.
Wow.
You're awake.
I'm keeping this.
I thought about what I could do today. This is what I
Are we gonna watch a movie?
You're gonna make it.
Let's share scary stories.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, the Amstud teacher gave us hope that we might not have class, and then we did have class.
Wait, who?
What?
Who didn't have class?
Oh, I said, never mind. It was a dumb joke.
Yeah,
After class.
we stuck pins through it. Oh yeah.
Do you still have that stuffed animal that we used?
That it's not a stuffed animal.
It's a doll.
In voodoo rituals, yes, that's right. It's more of a doll. It's not really a stuffed animal.
Voodoo rituals? What? What is happening?
Who we killing?
It's collectible.
I volunteer.
I'm so tired. When does this class end? It's not gonna be soon though.
There we go.
Everyone has something to take the edge off.
Oh my god.
This happens. Okay?
Why is he so
We'll actually
straight-faced?
talk about it later, but it's the most dramatic representation of where we are, so
Hi there, what's up? I thought they say the pen speaks mightier than the
The
sword.
Southern Congressman,
Nope.
walks into the Senate chambers and starts beating Charles Sumner to a bloody pulp with his cane. Yes, and the Southerner
And people just laugh?
Beating him to the point his cane breaks, and so all
That
the
guy's laughing,
Southerners
so sad.
send him new canes in the mail. And the Northerners say this is typical Southern chivalry. Someone you disagree with, you go beat them up.
That's my idea.
It's a representative of this
It sounds like my parents.
polarization. Now, I mentioned yesterday I want to talk though about another aspect of it, which is the emergence of what's going to be called slave power. Now, by slave power, I'm not talking about the power of slaves. What we're talking about is the power of the southern states. And this, no, just as a politically in the Congress. And so this phrase, they're going to use this phrase slave power, and what they mean is the southern states being able to get what they want. Sometimes they'll say slaveocracy ruled by the slave power. But there were actually conspiracy theories also attached to this. There were a number of politicians who died, and anytime a northern politician died, people were like, oh, it's slave power. Even when there's no evidence, right? And so, but the thing is, there is actually, there was a basis in fact, which is, remember, they're overrepresented by 60% in the South. They really do have more power. They really do have more electoral votes than the other guys have. And that does lead to Virginians dominating the presidency. It does. That is more Virginians than anyone else. It does lead to a Supreme Court being made up of mostly Virginians and Southerners. All of that is the consequence of this. And so they're going to refer to it as slave power. When we watched the Lincoln movie, there was actually one line in the movie that actually referred to slave power. Yes. Huh? Well, yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Because in a sense, Virginia got what it wanted, right? They wanted to be in control of everything, and that somewhat ends up happening. I will talk about this later, but I can talk about free labor. I will introduce free labor ideology momentarily. Yes.
Did you know that Lincoln used to be a wrestler?
A wrestler.
Yeah. I swear. He like beat up a bunch of dudes in New Zealand.
Interesting, because that's the first time I've heard that. Usually people are making sure that I know that he was actually a vampire slayer.
I mean, I'll show you the.
What? You didn't know that?
I've seen it.
The really funny thing is when we watch the Lincoln movie and you actually see that there's a connection between the Lincoln movie and the vampire slave movie.
Please no.
Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slave, you know the one I'm talking about. It was a comic book, they turned it into a movie.
It was a comic book first?
Yes! Oh, I'm sorry, graphic novel.
There's like a picture or something.
Wow, you did like the comics.
No,
I'm so
it
offended.
turns out
You're not
He's
even
in the reservoir. Like, I'm not joking.
Yeah, I'm not worried about that right now. What I'm worried about is this. Actually, specifically, I'm interested in 1830, but we'll get there. So that's the slave power. That is this overrepresentation. I told you yesterday that because of population changes, that doesn't last very long. So where did we decide that means they need to have their political battles? It's not going to be in the House? In the Senate. So in 1820, Missouri gets settled. There are all these people living there. And they decide that they want to turn Missouri into a state. Only if the Senate is the place where they're having concerns. because the House is a foregone conclusion. It's a loss for the South because the population is just growing too quickly in the North. If the country is divided 50-50 and Missouri wants to come in as a slave state, what happens to the Senate? The Senate is going to have more representation because that would be another state that's slave-oriented. So, in 1820, there isn't even an abolitionist movement. But there's already concern about the fact that slavery didn't die out the way they anticipated. It came back with a vengeance because of the Cotton Gin, and therefore there is going to be no simple resolution, and that means as new territories come in, they're going to have to deal with the question of slavery. What do you do with new territories? So Congress gets to make the decision of whether or not a new state exists. So in the process of having this debate, they decide, okay, Missouri can come in, but what we're going to do is we're going to take this territory up here, which belongs to Massachusetts, but is no longer connected to Massachusetts because New Hampshire and Vermont have been turned into states, that they're going to create a new state. They're going to call it Maine.
Ew.
And they're going to balance it out. Maine will be a free state, Missouri will be a slave state. That will keep the balance in the Senate. Then they're going to add one more aspect of this formula. They're going to create a dividing line, 3630. That's right here. And henceforth, anything south of 3630 will be a slave state, and anything to the north of it will be a free state.
Why is 3630 a curve for this flat?
Math and science students, you like to send me sprinting to the admissions office. How did this happen? October.
Sorry, that's boundary color.
Yes, Mason-Dixon line. That was the next question I was going to ask you. Yes, that's called the Mason-Dixon line. Why is it called the Mason-Dixon line? It is a name. Do you know who those guys were? Mason and Dixon. Yes, do you know?
What was their side?
Oh, it's funny you should say that. I know you're joking. They were actually astronomers. So they're scientists, but they were trained to determine where the 3630 parallel was in order to make this line work. And therefore, these guys did the work, so they named the line after them. They're actually scientists. They're not necessarily committed to slavery one way or the other, but it's interesting their names get attached. Going forward, territories that want to organize as states, right? That's the rule.
Did Mason do more work? Or is, oh wait, never mind. Dixon, Mason would be kind of...
Yeah, that doesn't sound right.
Wait, so is it slave or the...
Then, it's this line here. What this line is telling you, this is where Oklahoma is.
Oh yeah, they get the
Yeah. So yes, the 3630 line is the one that's going to be along Virginia, Kentucky, Missouri, the southern border. Well, it goes up a little bit here, but it's not going to be close. So they had to come to some kind of compromise, and they decide that the way they're going to address this, now, as you're going to see as we go on, eventually they rewrite the whole compromise. They scrap the Missouri Compromise and decide to do a different thing because that doesn't seem to be working. So there's going to be this attempt to compromise in order to prevent things from getting more of a crisis in the government. But it obviously doesn't work, but it goes on for decades. The first indication is in 1820 when they're having this discussion about Missouri and Maine and creating the border. And then saying, yes, in the future, everything north of this would be free and everything south of it would be slave. That's called the Missouri Compromise. So the Missouri Compromise creates Missouri and Maine, one free, one slave, and it creates the Mason System.
What if they wanted to make the Masons better than
What do you mean?
because like that, the Mason Dixon line, like, it adds more to the development. So like now it's more, it makes it more.
But the whole point of the compromise is that if they compromise, it will keep the unity of the country so that everyone gets something. Everyone doesn't get everything they want, but they're happy to compromise. And they think that this is going to solve the problem. And they're expecting that it will. And as I'm about to explain, things are going to spin out of control. By 1820, with the exception of what's called the Amstud Class, Illinois will actually have a reputation of being the northernmost slave state because people coming from the south bringing their slaves into Illinois are allowed to keep them under Illinois law. So there are actually plenty of slaves in Illinois, but all of them originated somewhere else. And that will be a point of contention through the 1800s. Illinois will end up being a very strange place because on the one hand it will have all these slaves who were brought there from somewhere else, but it will also be a hub, a nerve center for the abolitionists. In fact, the Fox Valley, where we are, was one of the main routes. Once you got through Mississippi, everyone was going into rivers, and the Fox River is kind of the end of the line to try to escape. Generally, if they're not ending up, say, in Chicago, they're actually trying to get the head out. It's not perceived as the best we can see.
Did they have slaves in Canada?
No. Yeah. There is a organization under the British Commonwealth. I don't know exactly the year that took place. Originally, Canada is not called Canada. It's called Acadia. Actually, it is the Acadia in the French. And then, if you look on the maps, you'll actually see Acadia, but it's still a region up here. But eventually, it's turned. I don't know exactly the year, but they do create an actual Commonwealth. It's still under the British Commonwealth. It still is. If you are driving your car and you want to go to Toronto, this highway, which is 201, is called the Queen's Highway. And as I always joke with my Canadian friends, the Canadians they are the most loyal of colonial subjects. They like being colonial subjects. They also have another highway named after Winston Churchill. And Winston Churchill was the Prime Minister during World War II. Who's the president? I would call that a fun fact, but that's more of a kind of unfun fact.
That's probably not.
Here's what happened. So that's 1820. Then something happens.
Okay.
And that something is the Second Great Awakening. I don't know if you remember, I mentioned it in passing, there was a First Great Awakening.
Is there a third?
Well, that's for historians to decide. But let me tell you what happened.
I woke up at 8:30 today.
I bet that was a great awakening for you.
No.
So, do you remember I told you that the Puritans, they had this kind of religious order, and it lasted about 3 generations, and then it kind of gets lost, and people aren't committed to it anymore. Plus, there's a geographic issue. Remember that? Okay. So, after that 3rd generation, by the time you get to around 1700, there's this commercial outburst, and as the religious people would have said at the time, Americans have become greedy. There's actually, that's the First Great Awakening. The First Great Awakening is, wow, Americans are not really looking to God anymore, and they're not behaving like the God-fearing, non-greedy Christians that they were, a few generations ago, and, this needs to change. So we get the First Great Awakening. So I didn't really spend much time on that. There was a first. This one, that's 1700 to about 1730. So the first one is 1700 to 1730. This one is basically the 1820s, more or less. You'll see things, it's not nicely delineated within the decades, so there's elements of it before and elements of it usually around 1840 probably. I do have some stats on this that actually show you the number of people going to church. Like that's data we actually have. And so they went from people not really going to church for a good reason. What did I tell you yesterday about where the people are going? What? Okay, in the north, but then where? Well, for example, a bunch of people end up in the North Woods. But not just the squirrels. In this case, the people are going all into the interior, and there are no cities. So what did the Puritans do when they first arrived? What was the first thing they did?
Build a church.
Build churches. Tax themselves, build churches. These people, the first thing they're doing is going and they're cutting down trees, building themselves houses, and making a farm. Okay? And generally, in a remote area, so there's no church. Now you have a bunch of people doing this, and the result is you have a whole lot of people that don't have any kind of religious center. And this has been going on for a number of decades. So what happens with the Great Awakening is, actually there's another change. So originally I told you the Puritans found religious institutions like Harvard, Yale, so on, and they want to train the next generation of Puritan ministers. The people in the Second Great Awakening are basically untrained people. There are some, but a lot of them are like self-taught. They're like reading the Bible, and these are kind of self-taught zealots who want to go and bring the Word of God to the people out on the plains. They're like, oh my God, all of these people, the country is going to hell in a handbasket because these people living on the plains, they have no God-fearing love, and it's terrible. So they're going to go out there and preach to them. And it's not just like 1 or 2 people. We're talking about hundreds of them are going out there. And it's actually quite effective. They end up building churches, and church going increases, so there's a Second Great Awakening. Well, okay, the byproduct of this, as I usually, my shortcut on this is, God is coming, look busy. Okay, that's the shortcut. God is coming, look busy. The looking busy part ends up leading to, so you have this religious awakening, and they decide that slavery is a sin. So one of the byproducts of this is abolitionism. There are actually a whole bunch of byproducts, which I don't have time to get into. One of those byproducts, actually, some of you are familiar with, graham crackers. Yeah, believe it or not, graham crackers are a product of the Second Great Awakening because they go through this health binge. They're like, oh my God, we have to cleanse the body as well as the soul. And this guy, Graham, invents his cracker, and it's been around since then, right? So it's actually a vestige of this. So abolitionism is one of...
When did they invent this form?
The what?
I'm sure we can come up with a great story about the lost Girl Scouts and well, Girl Scouts are 20th century creations or after that.
What? Did they have, like, instead of thin mints, did they only have, like, thick bread?
So, the Girl Scouts now sell s'mores cookies. They're new this year.
Wait, so do they have...
They're disgusting.
So they have big
Eat the s'mores. The Girl Scout cookie s'mores? Jeez, I don't know what they are.
They just couldn't give us like guns, so they like formed them like skinny, so it's like healthier.
Okay. Josh later. Okay. So there's a difference between this and this. This is what I want to get at here. This is really key. Who? No, there's no Puritans at this point. No, but just bear with me. So there's this Second Great Awakening. It's a religious awakening. The Puritans would be Calvinists. At this point, we're not even talking about Calvinists, and we're not even talking about. There's a whole bunch of new denominations which are going to kind of rise out of nowhere, really. A lot of self-taught people. Anyway, so abolitionism is going to see a moral issue. Okay, this is what defines abolitionism: is that slavery is a moral issue. And the thing about morality is, if it's a moral issue, it needs to end now, not off in the future. You don't continue committing the sin for like 30 more years because it's convenient for you. You're like, well, I can't stop sinning now. There's too much writing on it, And so the abolitionists are like, no, it's a sin, therefore it needs to end immediately. They want immediate emancipation, which is a very radical position. One of the other groups that's going to come out of this is the African Methodist Episcopalian Church. Black Methodists who are, they established their own churches. They are going to be the most radical of the abolitionists, in part because they're African American, right? And it's out of the AME that we're going to get two people that my guess is you have never heard of. No Star Wars jokes. What?
Oh boy, what is it?
The other one, this looks like Maria. Her name's pronounced Mariah. So we get these two people, Mariah Stewart and David Walker.
How do we know it's pronounced Mariah? She's dead.
So you've never heard of them, but they're actually incredibly important. Let's start with her. Mariah Stewart. Women in this period were not supposed to be speaking publicly. If they were, they better be speaking to an all-woman audience. Okay, women are not supposed to get up in front of either an audience of men or an audience of men. And women, it simply was forbidden. I mean, socially. I mean, it's just, you don't do that. And even in private, it was expected in a kind of patriarchal understanding that women's opinions are inferior to men's opinions. That's the understanding. Stewart is, number one, African American. And number two, not interested in those rules. So she's actually getting up in front of mixed audiences, and she's talking about the need to end slavery now because it's a sin. So she's a pioneer in every possible sense. She's the first black woman activist in American history. She's also the first woman to be getting up in front of a mixed audience and actually, getting political. This is going to have a consequence, as I'm about to tell you, because she's especially speaking to women, and women are going to put together their abolitionist movement, and they're going to gather petitions and try to get Congress to end slavery because it's a moral wrong. These people should not be confused. Oh, I need to get to David. Hold on. David is important for a related reason. The two of them are friends. They didn't know each other. Walker's situation is a little bit different. He wrote a pamphlet which was called An Appeal. That's the short title. The longer title is An Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World. Of the world, not just black Americans. And he says, citizens of the world. And it's a very radical piece of writing. At the very end of it, which was the most hard-hitting, he says it's actually not to the colored citizens of the world. What he says is, white Americans, have you not read your Declaration of Independence? You know the part that says all men are created equal? And so he takes the Lockean argument that was the Declaration, and he turns it into a kind of Thomas Paineian kind of pamphlet that says, no, when it said all men, it really meant all men, and oh, by the way, that means like all people. And all means all. And therefore, if you're not paying attention to that, there's clearly something wrong with you. I mean, it's a very hard-hitting argument that he makes. And let me ask you, so how do you think that went over?
He was killed.
Think Thomas Paine.
No, it went really well.
Hated, exiled, moved to Canada, ridiculed.
Acadia.
Huh?
The first one went really well.
Yeah, right. They put a price on his head. They want him dead.
Oh boy.
Okay?
Was it a big price?
Yes, a bunch of people in the South offer several $1,000s, which was worth an incredible amount back then, for anyone who will kill David Walker and show them the proof that he's dead.
Is it not legal?
No, of course it's not, but they put a bounty on him.
Wait, is it like state leaders or just like who put the price on his head?
A bunch of plantation owners in the South. They should be, except they're Southerners. And, you know, the Southerners aren't about to prosecute other Southerners for wanting to kill a black guy. So they put a price on his head. Now, Walker is doing this lecturing, and he publishes this pamphlet, which ends up being, you know, widely read and also widely rebuked. Gets a bounty on his head because of it. And the next year, in the winter of 1831, he dies. Now, as it turns out, it's from natural causes, but nobody believes it in the North. They're convinced slave power conspiracy. There was a hit on him. That must be why he died. There's no way. He must have been
Wait, did
poisoned.
somebody claim the money?
No, I don't believe so.
You should have shaved his head and like done it in Brown Queen.
He hadn't.
No, shave the hair off, not actually.
Or just send the
I
money?
think they were expecting to actually get his head, like, delivered,
Yeah.
you know, in a box. But anyway,
Just send some hair.
we know that he dies of natural causes, but nobody buys it. They think that he was, in fact, actually assassinated. And so he becomes a martyr to the abolitionist cause. It doesn't, well, had he lived a few more years and had a little longer of a career, you know, we're talking like Martin Luther King category of sainthood, right? No, and I don't mean that in a joking way. And so everyone knows him at that point. He's either notorious if you're in the South or he's famous in the North. And Stuart, who is his friend, she's going to kind of pick up the mantle for him, and she's going to be doing what he was doing. Obviously, her life is also threatened. She can't live in the South. It's impossible. But these people are, again, it begins with the religious inspiration, which is really a result of the people moving in to the interior and not really being tied to churches that's kind of inspiring this in the first place. They decide that this is a moral wrong and needs to be addressed. And then there's these people who should not be confused with these people. These are two exclusive categories. If these people want immediate emancipation, what do you suppose these people want?
Not immediate emancipation.
These are going to be the people who say, yeah, this isn't a moral issue for us. We just don't want it spreading. That's Lincoln right there. Seriously, that's Lincoln's position. Lincoln is coming from the anti-slavery camp. Lincoln will become abolitionist only during the war. some people, one historian argued that the war itself makes him more radical. But Lincoln is in the anti-slavery camp, and he says, we don't want it extended, but that doesn't mean we're trying to get rid of it right now. And what this is going to do is lead to the other thing that I mentioned to you, which is that free labor ideology. That is, free labor is superior to slave labor, always. And we would like to see free labor triumph. That means containing slavery where it is. We don't want to see it spread. If it goes away, great, that'll be awesome. But we're not talking about immediate emancipation. So remember, these two groups are different. Because of Stuart and the abolitionists and the women who are filing petitions, I'll come back to this. In 1836, the Congress is going to pass what's called the gag rule. And they actually say, we are not going to accept any petitions from you about slavery. Oh, I thought the First Amendment said that we had the right to petition for redress of grievances. Not so, says the Congress in 1836. No, you can petition us all you want. We are not going to read your petitions. We're not going to accept them, so don't even bother. The target here is not just people who are making an abolitionist argument or anything about slavery. Okay, because if it's pro-slavery, they're also not taking it according to the gag rule. The target here is women, because women are the ones doing the petition. So there's this kind of gendered aspect where, we are the elected men of the United States. We are not going to listen to all of these silly women who want to tell us that we should not be doing things to enslave us. Or even for that matter, if you are in the South, we're not going to listen to you either. We are simply going to avoid the slave issue by not accepting any petitions of any kind dealing with the slave issue. And there it sits for a week during spring break. So have a lovely break. I'll see you when you're back. Yes. Now, just skip down. Again, if you have your volume 1 word, you can put it on the table now. Father's Day.